AITA for refusing to treat my husband's side chick. Hi Reddit. Throwaway account because I don't even know if I want this tied to my real identity, and because the situation I'm about to describe is still raw. I'm shaking even typing this out, but I feel like if I don't get it off my chest, I'll lose my mind. So, for context, I'm a 32-year-old woman, and I've been a doctor for almost a decade now. I work in a busy hospital ER, one of those places where the fluorescent lights never go off, the smell of antiseptic and faint blood lingers in the air, and the waiting room always has at least 3 people groaning in pain no matter what time of day it is. I've seen it all. Literally. People stumbling in at 3 a.m. drunk out of their minds, screaming at us because we won't let them drink water before surgery. People handcuffed to gurneys because the cops brought them in after a brawl. Parents sobbing because their child spiked a fever and they think it's something worse. I've trained myself to stay calm, professional, detached. I've always prided myself on that. Or at least I thought I did. Because last week, everything changed. It was a Tuesday night. Tuesdays are usually manageable, not like the chaos of weekends, but still busy enough that we don't get to sit around. I remember I had just finished suturing up a guy who sliced his arm open trying to open a beer bottle with a knife, yes, really, and I was about to grab a coffee from the machine that spits out something barely resembling caffeine. That's when the nurse called me over. "There's a new intake," she said, her voice low. "Looks rough. Might need you." I sighed, grabbed my clipboard, and walked into the room. And that's when I saw her. She looked broken. That's the only word that fits. Disheveled hair clung to her damp face, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and her arms were covered in fresh and fading bruises. She was clutching her side like it hurt to even breathe. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty, like she had run straight here from somewhere without stopping to grab a jacket. I slipped into autopilot mode. Clipboard up. Calm voice on. Professional mask in place. "Hi, I'm Dr. Redacted," I said softly. "Can you tell me your name?" She sniffled, wiped her nose on her sleeve, and whispered it. And my heart stopped. Because I recognized it. It wasn't a common name. In fact, I had seen it over and over again, but not at work. Not in the hospital. On my husband's phone. Let me back up for a second, because I know how that sounds. I've been married for 6 years. My husband, let's call him Mark, is charming, funny, and the kind of guy who remembers the little things. He makes my coffee the way I like it, texts me silly memes during long shifts, and always insists on taking the trash out even when it's technically my turn. But about a year ago, I noticed something. His phone would light up late at night. He'd smile at it, type something quickly, then turn the screen away. At first, I brushed it off. He has friends, colleagues, family, right? I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. But then one night, when he was in the shower, a message popped up. It was from her. The name. The same name that was now sitting in front of me in the ER, bruised and broken. Back then, I didn't confront him. I told myself it could be innocent. I wanted to believe it was innocent. I wanted to believe I wasn't the cliché of the wife who ignores the signs. But sitting there, hearing her whisper that name, seeing her in the flesh for the first time, something inside me cracked. I tried to keep my professional face on. My hands were steady as I checked her vitals, even though inside they were trembling. I asked the standard questions. Any allergies? Are you on any medications? What happened tonight? She hesitated at that last one. Her eyes darted around, like she was searching for an escape hatch. I fell, she muttered finally. It was the kind of answer I've heard hundreds of times. And usually, I know better. Usually, I don't push right away. We're trained to look for signs of abuse, to give patients space, to circle back gently. But this time, I wasn't thinking like a doctor. I was thinking like a wife who suddenly realized the woman in front of her wasn't just some name on a screen. She was real. She was hurt. And she had some kind of connection to my husband. My pulse was pounding in my ears. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to ask her point blank, "Why is your name in my husband's phone?" But I couldn't. Because right then, I wasn't his wife. I was her doctor. And doctors don't scream at patients. I took a step back, trying to collect myself. My mind was spinning in two directions at once. One part of me was cataloging her injuries, calculating whether she needed imaging, blood work, or pain management. The other part of me was screaming, "This is her, this is her, this is the woman from the messages." She caught me staring at her a little too long, and for a second, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition? Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. But what I do know is that moment, those few seconds of eye contact, felt like the world tilted sideways. Because I realized something terrifying. Not only did I know her name, she knew mine. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself I was being paranoid, connecting dots that weren't there. Hospitals are full of coincidences, right? People have the same names all the time. Maybe I just wanted an excuse to believe my marriage wasn't unraveling in ways I hadn't let myself admit. But then, she opened her mouth. And everything I'd been afraid of came spilling out. She was trembling, gripping the edge of the hospital bed so hard her knuckles were turning white. Her voice was hoarse, shaky, desperate. I don't have anyone to call," she whispered, almost to herself. "I shouldn't even be here. I shouldn't be doing this." My pen hovered over the chart. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Okay," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm. "That's all right. You're safe here. Just take a deep breath for me, okay?" She nodded quickly, like she was trying to convince herself. And then, she said it. His name. My husband's name. Not once. Not in passing. But over and over again. She said it like a lifeline. Like a child clutching their blanket in the dark. I didn't know who else to call. He's always there for me. He knows what I've been through. He'll come for me if I ask. Her voice cracked on the word come. And my world shattered. It's a strange thing, the way your body reacts before your brain can even process it. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might vomit right there in the exam room. My hands, the ones that had stitched wounds and delivered babies without faltering, started to shake so badly I had to steady the stethoscope against my chest before putting it on her. She kept talking. Every word was a dagger. He always tells me I can call him. Always. He understands me. He knows what it's like. I don't even know what that means. He knows what it's like? What does my husband know about bruises on arms and panic in hospital rooms? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the chart across the room, tear the 4 tubing out of her hand, and shout, "How dare you? How dare you sit here in my hospital bed and say his name like you own it?" But I didn't. Because on paper, in that moment, I wasn't his wife. I was her doctor. And doctors don't scream. Instead, I forced my voice to stay level. "Okay," I said carefully, as if every word might splinter into glass if I wasn't careful. "Let's just focus on you right now. Can you tell me what happened?" She bit her lip, hesitated. Her eyes darted away. "I told you. I fell." I stared at her bruises. They didn't look like a fall. Not unless she'd been tumbling down a mountain. But I didn't push it. Not yet. Because I couldn't. Not when my mind was roaring, "This is her. This is the woman. The one who's been texting him late at night. The one whose name shows up again and again on his phone. The one who knows him in a way she shouldn't." I couldn't even focus on her injuries. I couldn't focus on her story. All I could hear was my husband's name falling from her lips like it belonged there. I excused myself for a moment, told the nurse I needed to order imaging, needed to check labs. But really? I just needed to breathe. I leaned against the cold metal of the supply cabinet, gripping it until my fingers ached. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs and kept pulling. Maybe I'm wrong, I told myself. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe she knows a different man with the same name. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. No one says a name like that unless there's history behind it. Unless there's intimacy. Unless there's something. When I walked back in, she looked at me differently. Her eyes lingered a little too long, like she was trying to place me. And then it hit me like ice water, she knows who I am. That flicker of recognition I'd seen earlier wasn't paranoia. It wasn't me imagining things. She knew exactly whose wife was standing in front of her. And she didn't say a word. I don't know how I kept going after that. How I kept my voice calm as I told her we'd run a few tests, how I kept my hand steady as I checked her pulse. Inside, I was collapsing. Every bone in my body wanted to throw her out of that room. To tell her she wasn't welcome here. To spit the words in her face, "You don't get to sit here and talk about my husband like he belongs to you." But I didn't. Because professionalism is a cage. And that night, I was locked inside it. And that's when I realized something worse. If she knew who I was. If she knew I was his wife. Then maybe, just maybe, my husband knew she was here. I splashed cold water on my face in the bathroom, gripping the edge of the sink like it was the only thing holding me upright. My reflection looked nothing like me. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes wide and glassy. I looked less like a doctor and more like a wife who just realized her marriage might be built on lies. "Get it together," I whispered to myself, barely audible over the hum of the fluorescent lights. "You are a doctor. You swore an oath. This is not about you." But no matter how many times I repeated it, the words sounded hollow. Because underneath the white coat, the steady voice, the carefully controlled hands, there was rage. Rage so hot it made my skin prickle. Rage so sharp it made me want to claw at the walls. I had two options, and I knew it. Option 1, treat her like any other patient. Keep my distance. Write my notes, order the labs, stitch what needed stitching. Pretend she was just another stranger who wandered into my ER. Option 2, refuse to treat her. Hand her chart to another physician. Step back and wash my hands of it all. If anyone asked, I could make it sound professional. Conflict of interest, I could say. Or not comfortable continuing care. It wouldn't be unusual. It would even be justified. But here's the truth. Part of me didn't want to hand her over. Part of me wanted her to stay right there in my exam room, where she had to look me in the eye. Part of me wanted her to know that I knew. That she wasn't a secret anymore. That the man she clung to in whispers was my husband. So when I walked back in, stethoscope around my neck, chart in hand, professionalism dangling by a thread, I did something I never should have done. I asked her, "Do you know husband's name?" Her reaction was instant. Her face drained of color like someone had pulled the plug and let all the blood rush out. Her lips parted, but no sound came out for several seconds. And then, she whispered, almost too softly to hear, "You're his wife, aren't you?" The words punched me in the stomach harder than any physical blow could have. Because in that moment, the last shred of plausible deniability evaporated. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't me connecting dots that weren't there. It was real. She knew him. She knew me. She knew exactly who I was. And that meant my husband wasn't just texting another woman. He wasn't just entertaining some late-night distraction. He was involved with her. Involved enough that she recognized me on sight. My throat tightened so much I could barely breathe. 1,000 questions clawed their way up my chest. How long? Why her? Did he ever talk about me? Did he laugh at me behind my back? But I swallowed them all. Because the room wasn't soundproof. Because the nurse was only a curtain away. Because if I broke down now, I wasn't just a betrayed wife, I was an unprofessional doctor who'd let her personal life detonate in the middle of her shift. So instead, I stood frozen, clutching the chart like a shield. And she just stared at me. Pale. Silent. Guilty. The air between us felt heavy, electric, suffocating. Finally, she broke the silence. Her voice was low, shaking. I didn't know you'd be here tonight. Like she was apologizing. Like she was the one caught off guard. And maybe she was. But all I could think was, of course you didn't. Because if you had, you wouldn't have come. You wouldn't have walked into my hospital, sat on my bed, and let my hands touch your bruises. You wouldn't have dared to say his name in front of me. I wanted to ask her everything. I wanted to demand details, demand the truth, demand she look me in the eye and tell me what she was to him. But I couldn't. Because I was still her doctor. And I knew if I asked, if I crossed that line, there would be no going back. No plausible deniability. No professionalism. No protecting myself from the fallout. So I swallowed the bile in my throat, forced my voice into a register that sounded almost human, and said the only thing I could. Let's focus on your injuries for now. But inside? Inside, I was already planning what I'd do when I got home. Because when my shift ended, I wasn't just going to confront my husband. I was going to tear the truth out of him. The silence in the room felt unbearable. I could hear every detail, the hiss of the oxygen line from the next bed, the faint squeak of sneakers on the linoleum outside, the beep of the monitor tracking her pulse. I thought I had already hit the breaking point. I thought hearing her say my husband's name, realizing she knew exactly who I was the worst it could get. I was wrong. Because that's when everything flipped. She crumbled. 1 second she was stiff, pale, avoiding my eyes. The next, she broke apart like glass under too much pressure. Her shoulders shook. Tears spilled over, soaking the thin hospital gown. Her words came out in ragged bursts, like each one cut her throat on the way out. Yes, she sobbed. Yes, I'd been seeing him. There it was. The confession I'd both dreaded and expected. My ears rang, my stomach dropped. But before I could even process that knife to the chest, she kept going. And her next words nearly knocked the air out of me. I'm pregnant. I froze. Pregnant. The word echoed in my skull, loud and hollow. Pregnant. With his child. I thought betrayal was the worst-case scenario. I thought discovering she was his mistress would be the death blow to my marriage. But no, this was something else entirely. This was permanence. This was him building a future with someone else, whether I liked it or not. My vision blurred. I blinked, once, twice, trying to steady myself. But before I could even wrap my mind around that single, shattering truth, she said something worse. Something I never saw coming. Her voice dropped to a whisper, hoarse and broken. I didn't come here just because I fell. I didn't fall. I looked at her bruises again. The handprints on her arms. The swelling along her ribs. Injuries I'd seen 100 times before, always explained away with clumsy excuses. And then she said it. It was him. My husband. The man who kissed my forehead every morning. The man who texted me jokes during long shifts. The man I thought I knew. She choked on the words, sobbing harder now. When I told him I was keeping the baby, he snapped. He shoved me. He hit me. I begged him to stop. But he wouldn't. That's why I came here. That's why I'm alone. Because I didn't know where else to go. My world shattered. Every piece of the life I thought I had built disintegrated in a matter of seconds. I had walked into that room convinced she was the enemy, the woman who stole my husband. And maybe she was, on the surface. But now? Now I realized she was something else. She was a victim. A victim of the same man I thought I loved. I couldn't breathe. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air too thick to swallow. My hands trembled so hard I had to grip the chart to keep them still. Memories flashed in my head, faster than I could stop them. The late nights he said he was working late. The way his phone lit up at 2 a.m. The sudden temper flares that I brushed off as stress. The nights he'd come home, eyes dark, fists clenched, and I told myself not to ask questions. How many signs had I missed? How long had I been sleeping next to a man capable of this? I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to throw up. But she was still in front of me, crumpled on the bed, shaking like a terrified child. She was the one who needed saving. And for the first time in my entire marriage, I saw my husband clearly. Not as my partner. Not as my best friend. Not as the man I had defended to everyone who ever doubted him. But as a monster. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady even though I felt like I was splintering apart inside. You did the right thing coming here, I whispered, setting the chart aside. You're safe now. Do you hear me? You're safe. Her sobs quieted just enough for her to nod, a fragile, broken movement. And in that moment, I knew something with absolute clarity. My life was no longer about saving my marriage. It was about saving myself. And her. From him. I treated her injuries. I cleaned the cuts, ordered the labs, checked for fractures. I made sure nothing internal was bleeding. I called for imaging, documented every bruise. I did my job. Because in that moment, I wasn't just a doctor. I was the only person standing between her and complete abandonment. She had no one else. No family to call. No friends she trusted. The one person she thought she could depend on, the man I called my husband, was the very person who hurt her. And so I became her lifeline. Whether I wanted to be or not. Hours later, when the chaos of the ER thinned out and my shift finally ended, I drove home in silence. My hands clenched the steering wheel so hard they ached. My chest felt heavy, like I was dragging a corpse inside me, the corpse of the life I thought I had. When I opened the door, the house was dark. Quiet. He was asleep. My husband. The man who had smiled at me that morning, kissed my cheek, told me to have a good shift. Lying there in bed like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't shattered me. Like he hadn't brutalized another woman. Like he wasn't hiding a child that could change everything. I stood in the doorway, staring at him. His chest rising and falling peacefully. The faint outline of his face in the glow from the streetlight outside. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't recognize him. He was a stranger. A stranger who had destroyed my trust, my love, and my sense of safety, all while pretending to be the man I loved. I wanted to shake him awake. To scream. To demand answers. To spit the truth in his face. I know everything. But I didn't. I just stood there, silent, watching him sleep. Because what do you even say when your entire life has been turned inside out in a single night? And now, here I am. Writing this. Still reeling. Still torn. Do I report him? Do I go to the police with what she told me, knowing it could blow everything up, not just my marriage, but his career, our families, our entire lives? Do I confront him first, force him to admit what he did? Do I leave, pack my things and never look back, knowing I can never trust him again? I don't know. I only know that the man I thought I married doesn't exist anymore. But here's the part one can't get out of my head, the thing that keeps gnawing at me even more than the betrayal. AITA for almost refusing to treat her in the first place? Because I almost walked away. I almost handed her chart to another doctor and let someone else deal with it. If I had done that, maybe her injuries would have still been treated. Maybe she would have been fine. But maybe not. Maybe she would have slipped through the cracks. Maybe her bruises wouldn't have been documented. Maybe her story never would have been told. And I can't stop thinking, if I had put myself first, If I had let my personal anger override my duty, she might not have gotten the care she desperately needed. So, Reddit. AITA,